things we view as fact in this country, they're in fact judgments. So I want to offer a quick perspective on my judgments or biases and then give you 6 or 7 areas where if those judgments are accurate, the American perception of the world is going to be challenged. Democracy, good. Dictators, not so much. U.S. Army, good. Russians, not so much. Hold on a minute here. These are not facts. These are judgments. If you look at some of the judgments I would make about what we've seen in the past decade or more and what we will see, my first point would be if human beings have a choice in an era of insecurity, they will choose security above all else. They want not to walk out the door and have their head put on a stake. They want safety. If you look for, and if they don't want safety, their military or security service will. Good example, Egypt. I think we may see the same in Libya. Second, if we believe or accept this judgment or bias on my part about humans' interest and stability, democracy is inherently destabilizing when losers believe they've lost forever. They lose forever when you have cultures that are divided by religion, for example, Sunni, Shia, Alawite, by geography in some ways Libya, by ideology in some ways Muslim Brotherhood versus the more secular military. But we love democracy. I view it as inherently destabilizing in cultures where the losers think they lost forever. Sunnis in Iraq. They will never, I think, win again in a fair election. Third, if we accept that democracy opens fissures, when we see fissures, when we see ungoverned space, we see instability. If you look at, in my world of counterterrorism, every place from the southern Philippines to the tribal areas of Pakistan to Afghanistan, if you look to the provinces of Yemen, if you look to post-1992 Somalia, if you look to Boko Haram, if you looked at the Sahel, there is one characteristic that they all share, and that is the unwillingness or inability of a federal power to project power. So what I'm telling you is people like stability. When they have instability, sometimes that results from democracy, and sometimes that leads to extremism. And finally, to come full circle, to close those fissures, you have a few opportunities. One is a dictator. 2 is a foreign intervention. 3 is chaos and instability. You can dispute those. But before we fall back and say democracy is good and dictators are bad, I'd ask a question. If you walk out the door and you're going to get beheaded, what do you want? So let me close with what the implications are. Number 1, I believe we'll face choices, and I don't do predictions except for the next 20 seconds. I'll predict in the next 120 days the Americans and the Russians come to a deal on Syria, because we as a people, and I'm hearing this in DC over the past week or 2, are going to have to make a decision. That decision is, do we stand on principle or do we look for a ceasefire that's not perfect? I believe our choices in some cases will be between democratic ideals and power players like dictators. Second, when we face that choice, I think often, whether we like it or not, we're going to end up with strongmen, the same kinds of people that we applauded leaving the scene, Hosni Mubarak. Number 3, I think the emigration patterns we are seeing and the changing demographics in Europe change how we will view this and might lead the Europeans to have a stronger interest in pulling an increasingly isolated America back, because Europe's going to feel tremendous pressure, obviously, and that pressure is not only short-term terrorism, it's long-term demographics and immigration. I can see a scenario where the coalitions of the future are European with Americans. Next, we're going to have choices about stages of intervention. We have come to the conclusion that preventive intervention is bad. I think there will be more judgments about this. For example, if you look at what the French did in Mali, which I still think, despite what we saw in Mali today, was a tremendous success. That was a preventive intervention against an extremist group, and highly successful. Next, when we build these coalitions, we'll be dealing with troubling partners. Those partners may have human rights violations on their hands. And when we deal with those partners and when we rebuild cultures, we will have choices about whether we want democracy or whether we deal with a partner that will bring security, and those partners will be ugly. So, lastly, if we believe that we are good and the Russians, Iranians are bad, if you look at the solutions that might lead to more peace but less democracy, there are two key players in that region who will help ensure that solution, and that's Russia and Iran. So, I guess I'd close by saying, as an analyst, I think sometimes we confuse time and time and time again the difference between a judgment and a fact, the difference between what we think and what we know, and we believe that yesterday represents tomorrow. And I would suggest that yesterday never represents tomorrow. We never know what the trends are, except that every trend we see in retrospect is one we didn't predict. And I've tried to give you 6 or 7 ways that will make us uncomfortable, that suggest the world is changing, but that are hard to dispute. Thanks.